I think for the second week in a row, goalie broke the transition. But we are live. Welcome to TheSTiKSLive, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this Monday evening or afternoon, or maybe even Tuesday morning if you're in Australia. We have a packed show full of plenty full of guests of obviously DeSoto, Chris, and Josh and Lemon Kiwi. Just before I get to that though, Landon.
Yeah.
You're a new man. You've got a new hat and a new haircut. What is going on? Like, are you going for like a midlife crisis or something?
You think based on how my father haircut looks, but no, I don't know. I feel like a new man. I've been, I mean, you guys know, I've been talking to you guys and even on the show over time, I've been saying, you know what, I'm going to change my at possibly soon. Mr. RosterMania, it's always a nickname, but it's not really what I go by, and just changed it. And yeah, that's where we're at. The next day I get a haircut. Like I said, it's been a good week so far. I've enjoyed it immensely. And plus, RosterMania is starting up. I don't think this week could honestly get any better.
Okay, interesting. Well, we are, as I said, joined by some very lovely looking guests. Chris and Josh, how are we both doing this evening?
Yeah.
It's nice to have more British on the show than American. I feel like we're slowly taking over because now Landon is technically the only person from the US.
I am.
We're not counting goalie because he's not on the show, but
wow.
Okay, I'm sorry. If anyone doesn't know, Chris and Josh, do you want to just give yourselves a little bit of a background? Obviously, you guys are at DeSoto, what you do from day to day and what kind of you do within the eSports scene.
Josh, you want to take the reins? You go first.
I was going to say the same thing to you, mate. But
and that's what we do.
That is what you do. You just argue with each other.
Chris and I, so we're part of DeSoto. Basically, it's all about eSports coverage. We do coverage around North America, around Europe. We do some, and we actually go to these events live. We have an international press team, German, French, Spanish, English, and then, that's it in a nutshell. Call of Duty has been our main focus, but this year we expanded to some Counter-Strike, some LoL, some other things as well. Chris and I have been involved in esports between us probably for about, 20 years. Hundreds of events we've gone together, doing various, probably every different thing possible to do in esports between us. And that's it.
Nice.
I've got nothing to add to that. Good. That was good.
Can I go now?
Yeah. That's what we need. Like, Chris is going to take the rest of the show now. No, you are.
I'm a bit worried that people won't fully understand my accent, so I brought Josh as my translator as much as
I'm ill, though. I'm ill, so obviously my voice isn't always like throaty.
Yeah. I have to applaud Josh because if I was in his position, I'd be in bed crying, saying like, "No, show's off. Let's do it tomorrow." So I applaud you for coming on. They've done everything from obviously Chris, you've been working at EG. I'm not sure if you have as well, Josh.
So Josh and I both got into working at the same time. Both like originally met back on the old Rainbow Six on the old Xbox, and then been e-buddies since then. So I say e-buddies, we literally live together. He's in the next room.
I thought he said e-boy.
E-buddies is a new term for me. Let's not go there.
We're sharing a flat in London. I feel like the friendship developed a bit more since then. But yeah.
I'm trying to play it down.
Is that a reason that Mike's not with you? I feel like the triplet, you can have big bed, you can share it. And
we used to live together, all three of us, a long time ago. A long time ago. I'm only fucking 27, but yeah, about 3 years ago. And then Mike ended up going to Edinburgh, and we ended up coming down to London. We got Nico as well, who's like another big part of DeSoto, who's in Belgium.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, we're also joined by the lovely Lemon Kiwi. How are we this evening?
Good. How is everybody else? I hope everyone's well since the last time I came on.
Yes, I think so. It's been a while.
I feel great.
Yeah, I mean, Landon, let's see what you've done to Landon since you've been gone. Like, he's just turned into
haircut, new name, different.
I don't even know who he is anymore. Like, is he meant to be on the show? I don't know. But Lemon Kiwi, you run or are part of something called, obviously, the Female Pro League, for anyone who doesn't know. We're going to come on to talk about it a little bit later, but do you want to just kind of give a little bit of background about yourself and the Female Pro League and what you do within Call of Duty eSports?
I mean, I guess I've been here before, but in case you guys haven't catch me before, I guess a host and commentator, I guess one of the very few female ones as well, so far, from what I know. And so I help run the Female Pro League, which we'll jump into later. But, all-female Call of First and all-female Call of Duty League, $8,000 prize pool so far, and it's going great, and details later, I guess. So
sounds like a good time. I think you and Landon are both casting together later this year in EGLX, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken.
At the end of the month, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be looking forward to that, and hopefully you guys will as well. But we're going to kick things off by talking about Crown Melbourne that obviously happened at the weekend. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, I think we're going next to roster changes, is it? No, it's not. We're going to Female Pro League next. I wrote the schedule and I don't even know what it is. And then we're going to go to a break. Afterwards, we're going to talk about RosterMania, followed by eSports and journalism, because that's what obviously both Chris and Josh do. And kind of, if you want to get involved, hopefully we can give you some inspiring words and inspire the next generation of people living together and arguing with each other. So, but Landon, why don't you go ahead and start off by letting us know kind of a bit about Crown Melbourne, who was attending it and what was on the line?
Yeah, so obviously there was a little bit of preparation coming into the Crown Melbourne Invitational. I don't know if Glory can help explain this, but there was like a number of different qualifiers. There was like open qualifier 1, and there was the group stages. There was a lot of preparation for what, only like a 7 or 8 team tournament. So either way, though, I'll go move on. We did have the open qualifiers, which was obviously an online tournament, in which case the top 4 teams from this particular tournament would make it on into the group stages for the Melbourne Invitational. And those 4 teams ended up being the Chiefs Esports Club, Team Orbit, Apotheon, and Planetronics Envy. For those who don't know, it's not anything associated with Team Envious or anything like that, but the regular Planetronics Envious squad. From the ANZ. They would later move on to obviously be placed into regular groups, in which case those 2 top teams who would kind of face off at a best of 7 would be planted into the regular bracket, in which case that's kind of where the action would in some ways kick off, Thomas. And some pretty interesting matches, I got to admit. There was I believe a 0-3 comeback, best of 7 between Apotheon and Chiefs, where Apotheon went up 3-0, and Chiefs ended up coming back, which was, at least in my opinion, probably one of the best matches that we had in the entire tournament. But it would be Chiefs and Orbit who would make it through, and they would play for obviously qualification. And it would, I believe, be Chiefs who ended up playing against Tainted Minds, and Orbit who ended up facing off, against the regular Mind Freak squad.
Okay. Before we get to kind of the nitty-gritty stuff, obviously Optic Gaming 1, I have a quite an important question for both Josh and Chris. Obviously, being around for such a long time, you're like historians in a way. What is your opinion as a whole on this event? Because from my perspective, it's clear that they obviously wanted to put on this event, bring the best teams from both regions outside of ANZ to kind of promote Call of Duty as an esport. So from your guys' experience, and obviously, I mean, Europe is still developing, it's fair to say. It's not nowhere near where North America is, but what's your opinion overall on this event and kind of helping Call of Duty become a global esport?
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to, well, firstly, start at the beginning. I guess Activision are obviously doing quite a big push in the Southern Hemisphere, I guess. I was thinking to myself earlier, I was quite surprised that they haven't tried to rope South Africa in somehow. But so at the moment, there kind of seems to be a disproportionate amount of, I guess, resources that are getting sent their way. I mean, with tournaments like this, obviously, this is kind of the first of its kind. I don't really remember a time when we brought together like the 3 champions from, around the world into one tournament. And so, it's an exciting prospect for Australia, and I don't want to diminish that. At the same time, to be completely honest, I didn't see a lot of the tournament this weekend. Obviously, it was a bit of a time clash. Living in the UK, that's my excuse that I'm using. But even just looking at the results, obviously we've had a big move to kind of single elimination this year. I guess for scheduling reasons, and obviously it makes it for a more exciting final if the teams have never met before. But it just seems a little bit of a waste of getting these 2 teams out there for the Britain.
2 series.
Yeah,
a maximum of 14 maps. That's basically what it was. Flying half.
But yeah, both Optic and Millennium have both played 9 maps each. It's really not a lot of Call of Duty. Between them, they've played 2 Australian teams. I mean, surely they could have done. There wasn't even that many teams. They could have easily fitted in like some sort of round robin or something like that, where all 7 teams were in the league or something along those lines. So they maximise the Call of Duty for the viewers, for the people who are there on the day. And I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really know what the plan was in terms of scheduling and things like that. But it just seemed like a bit of a waste, and it seems like they didn't really get the maximum out of it. And I know, Landon, you were mentioning that in a YouTube video, you said, "Do you think this should be considered a major event?" And on paper, just with the attendees, I would say probably, just simply because you've got the 3 champions there. But the way it's been run and things like that, or the way it was kind of almost oriented towards just being a bit of a showpiece, I'd say kind of has diminished that. And so in that regard, probably not really. Optic have walked out winners. What a surprise. And for that reason, I don't think it's something that they'll be looking back on years to come and say, we won this event, COD champs, and we won that Australian event that, we played 2 matches and then walked out easy winners.
Yeah, I don't think. See, the thing about a showpiece thing is that you could easily say the same about ESWC as well, but because Europe is slightly better, people don't necessarily see it like that. But when you send the Optic or any American teams to these events, when we're going to win, outright most of the time, in many ways, yeah, it is just a showcase event. And for Millennium and Optic going to this event, in Melbourne, for them, it's a great marketing exercise. Optic are a lot more than just eSports. They're a brand where they're a group of people strengthened by this Optic brand, which people want to follow, they want to see in the flesh. And I think to a certain extent, that's probably the case with Millennium too, at the very least with Tommy and Swanee, no disrespect to the other two, but their faces are nowhere near as prominent or as prolific. Probably because they don't make that much effort. Also because Swanee's a good-looking bastard as well, so that's probably helped him a lot in his eSports campaign. But otherwise, I've got to agree with Chris. There is a sense of waste there. And I think if it's talking about putting Call of Duty, Australian Call of Duty more on the map, I think they'd do a better job if they were going to international events, flying over the very best teams to compete amongst the best teams in the world, as opposed to Optic and Millennium going over there, to be honest.
Okay. I want to bring up one more thing before obviously we carry on talking about what actually happened. You brought up a very good point in the DeSerto podcast, what obviously you put up today, I believe. Go check it out if you haven't. Free kind of little shout out there. But in regards to this event, it's almost like, as you said, like a waste of money in terms of, it's an invitational and a lot of people calling it a major event, but the sad reality is, and I'm not trying to say this in like the wrong way or anything, but the reality is the Australian teams are nowhere near the standard of what we have in Europe and especially North America.
Well, is that true? Because obviously the reason why Australia are on the map at all are one of these three, this trinity of big regions in Call of Duty and global Call of Duty is because of the performance of the previous two Call of Duty champs. So in a way, Activision have given their rewards for that. But on the other hand, it is a disproportionate amount of resources at the end of the day. And they could have, I'm not sure. It's easy to say that Activision are massive. They've got, as far as we're concerned, unlimited resources in order to be able to grow this on a global scale. And I help feel that the resources weren't spent as wisely, perhaps, as they could have been in this very first season of the Call of Duty World League.
But, I would say that, going back to what Josh said about ESWC and this, I wouldn't say that this was so much a waste of money because, it's kind of hard.
It never is a waste of money.
It's hard to speculate on what their objectives were when running this. But I think for me, it's more that I don't think that the organisation, the way it's been done, really did a real service to, what could have been an excellent event, even if they just had the same pool of teams. Had they made more of it, because it seems like it was approached from an Optic and Millennium point of view, that they were told to just go there and just, show what they can do, and that was it, and play.
Like the flag for Call of Duty.
Yeah, and if they'd been dumped into a proper league situation or something that seemed more competitive from the start, even if they'd whitewashed the competition, it wouldn't matter so much. But at least it would have been a proper showcase of the teams that are down there. Whereas I don't really think it would. It was almost like the Australians were made to fight out for the opportunity to play these two regions.
Yeah, it's like they were on the podium already, and it's just like fight to play them.
Yeah, they got guaranteed at least $4,000 for just showing up.
Yeah, I wanted to get your guys' opinions on that, Jen and Landon. I mean, coming into this, Optic and Millennium were guaranteed top four. They, as I said, could only play a maximum of 14 maps for flying. I don't know how long it is for America, but I know for coming from the UK, it's at least, you're looking around a 12-hour flight.
Yeah, I heard it was like 17 hours for some of them.
It's like a free holiday in a way, but at the same time, it's like there could have been so much more to it, as you said. I mean, even if it was not pool play and we had like double in best of 7 and got rid of these all-star matches, what I'm sure were really entertaining and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we only really saw, like, for people that support like Millennium and Optic, they only saw them play twice, and that just is something that I think we're not used to in Call of Duty from previous years. I mean, we're used to like having UMG events where you'll play 4 maps in the pool and then you'll play a double limb bracket, best of 5, and you may potentially play another up to, 7, 8 maps, depending on how your bracket goes if you get knocked out early. And I think the losers bracket made it entertaining as well. So I don't know. I'm sure, obviously, there's a lot of speculation about changes coming into Season 2. I'm sure they're obviously taking on board constructive criticism and so on and so forth. But as we said in the semi-finals where Millennium and Optic were starting, we had Mindfreak going up against Millennium, who ended up losing 4-0 to Millennium, and then Optic 4-0'd, I think it was Tatum Mines in the end. Well, obviously left OG Millennium final. I mean, I'm going to put it out there just because I have to. Is anyone surprised that it was an OG Millennium final? Was anyone secretly thinking Mindfreak had a chance?
Very hard to say. I mean, COD champs in the past have suggested.
Yeah, because I mean, a European team hasn't placed in the money last two COD champs, yet this Mind Freak team, it be it different players 2 years ago, but generally speaking, this Mind Freak team has. What, if you're going off statistics, you would say that they should, but we know how Call of Duty worked. It was one series, but it wasn't like it was a 4-3 or a 4-2. It was a 4-0.
I don't think anyone was like necessarily like surprised that it was these two. I don't think anyone was surprised that it was at least these three teams mentioned in the top three. I think if you would have threw Mind Freak in there versus OG in the grand finals, I think there would have been maybe a little bit more of like, oh, wow, like a little bit more of shock value. But I think to say like OG and Millennium is a surprise, like not really. I mean, to be completely honest, I know me and you were talking about predictions, Tommy, in previous shows. You're like, do you really want to do predictions for this? And I was like, well, OG, Millennium, Mind Freak, like I can just like say them right now, not taking anything away, but based on like what we know, based on what we've seen in the previous and in the seasons and stuff. I mean, I don't think this tournament was anything crazy. I don't think this tournament was necessarily like anything out of the ordinary from what anyone predicted. I mean, I wouldn't say it's crazy for anyone to think that Mind Freak coming into this particular series versus Millennium could have at least caused a little bit of a storm potentially, being Australia's best right now and kind of having a very dominant run through their particular stage. But I think in some cases though, it was a good event. I'm not taking anything away from that. I know we've already kind of touched on the issues with the formatting and stuff, but I think
one thing I'll ask you guys, okay? Have you watched the Australian stream religiously enough just to be able to compare the quality of Call of Duty based on how you've looked at their gameplay alone, regardless of how you thought they may have competed against the likes of Team Millennium? Have you actually watched quality of Australian teams and watched just their own gameplay to determine how they might match up against the other two? Have you?
I think that's a good point you bring up. I think definitely from watching Season 1 playoffs, there was definitely a kind of slightly different meta in terms of ban and protects. You saw, in a way, some refreshing strategies. And I think you bring up a good point. We are basing our assumptions off previous Call of Duties and stuff, and maybe we shouldn't be because of obviously it's a new Call of Duty.
My point is it's actually hard. It's actually really hard to compare.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the most, well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo what you were going to say in terms of it's difficult, but obviously sometimes going off like past Call of Duties can shoot yourself in the foot. But at the same time, it's all really we know because we don't see these top tier teams from all three regions compete with each other regularly enough. I mean, in the past it's been COD champs and then Gfinity, although I think Mind Freak pulled out last minute, and maybe ESWC it's been. There hasn't really been enough there hasn't been this year at all across the board. There's only been like 5 or so lands, including playoffs, that are really lands that have a lot of big teams and big players attending. So I think it is hard. I mean, me and Landon, I know certainly been talking about it all year. We've had such a hard struggle as people that talk about Call of Duty, predicting and giving our opinions about certain teams and stuff, because you're only basing it off online, and that's not, we know at the best of times, the best place to go off of. So. I think it is a lot of uncertainty at the end of the day. I think.
Go ahead. You're good.
I was going to say, you've got to remember as well, this is a very, very different event to, the Call of Duty champs. Every year, teams like Millennium come into COD champs and they're expected to perform. And they carry a lot of pressure. And I think there's certainly a mentality element to it all, because they came here and, it's different when you take on American teams and they've always got that kind of burden, like, is this going to be the European team that's going to perform? Is this going to be the European team? And in the end, I think, again, we discussed this in our podcast, a lot of the teams end up playing almost not to lose rather than to win. Whereas they come into this and it's like, what difference? It doesn't really make that much difference.
Exactly. It's Tim Henman mentality. It's vintage English mentality in the shape of Tim Henman. Someone who has so much pressure on to perform every time. And to an extent, Murray as well. It was a tennis analogy. But he'd always get to like the semi-finals and whatnot, but we never really clinch it when it came to the big Grand Slams. It's the same thing as England, It's quite strange, even though the press is nowhere near as prevalent in eSports. Well, not maybe as prevalent, but because there aren't as many press talking about it, that English people still do feel so much pressure. And you can that's analogous to British teams in other sports on global stages.
I think I wouldn't even. Yeah, I think it is with sport, but with just esports, I think you can really compare that just to the whole of European esports. When the French teams, when the Spanish teams come up against the British teams, often they're feeling that same pressure that I guess the Britons do against the Americans, thinking, "Oh my God, I've got to perform here."
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's quite a nice analogy you make about, obviously, because I mean, it's clear when we've seen British teams go over. I mean, the only one instance I can think of is when obviously TSM did well at Anaheim in Ghost, I believe. But other than that, it's like something is stopping us, but it may just come down to that pressure of only being a select few teams going out there and having an obligation to do a certain standard, or set a certain pace for the rest of the teams, etc. But I think in general, at least it's an event. At least it's an event in Australia. There's a lot of positives, I think, to take from this. It looked like they had great sponsors behind the event. And hopefully by looking at it, it's going to obviously spread across Australia, New Zealand, and across that region in general, and promote Call of Duty eSports. And as Chris touched on at the start, it would have been obviously nice to see maybe some teams from Asia or South Africa, just, to mix it up. It's not really about, it always being the best competition. It's about being a global representation of what the world can produce at the moment. And, if one person sees their friend who's from Asia compete and it makes him pick up the controller and want to play, then I think that's done something positive in my mind. But just before we finish it off, I want to get your guys' opinion on, it's kind of a bit of a bizarre topic, but we'll talk about it anyway, with what's going on in terms of sponsorship. Because this event, we've seen Mindfreak drop Platronics and pick up Astro. We've seen Tated Minds pick up Platronics. And the more interesting one is rumors about potentially Optic have dropped Astro and picked up Turtle Beach. I don't know who wants to take that one first.
What's your question? What's your question?
In terms of what are your thoughts on this? Because it's interesting that obviously Platronics have evidently picked up Tatum Minds maybe off the bat of dropping Mindfreak, but I think what's more interesting is potentially Optic picking up Turtle Beach and the rumors. What are your thoughts exactly about that?
I still don't really know what your question is, but in terms of what the impact is on the esports scene, perhaps for significance from the company's point of view, which I think is important to look at from Astro's perspective, especially and Turtle Beach, especially brands who put a lot of support into the esports scene. You got to ask a few questions, and it might be speculation because both very big companies. But could Astro afford to continue to be able to sponsor Optic? Did Turtle Beach come in there and muscle the win because they realised actually they couldn't afford not to lose out on Optic Gaming, and Turtle Beach are obviously the biggest headset manufacturer in the world. But otherwise it's just in a sense Optic auditioning off their brand to the highest bidder.
I'd guess it's definitely that, because you've got to consider that when Astro have been with Optic for a good while, and at that time they had a COD team and a Halo team, they've just had a Counter-Strike team, which with it brings obviously a lot of extra coverage. Almost certainly their fee will have gone up by 50-100%.
Price just raised.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and it might have, it's hard to speculate. It might have priced Astro out, or Astro might have thought we're just not going to get the return. Our market's predominantly console. There could be countless reasons with that, but it's probably going to be something in that ballpark. I would guess.
Okay. Interesting. Well, either way, as you say, when you're a team like Optic and you have the resources and you can say, we've picked up this team, we now have, the exposure in this esport as well. You have kind of got the ball in your park, as you said, Josh. Moving aside from Crown Invitation, sorry, I'm getting my words muddled up. Female Pro League, Jen. Tell me a little bit about it. Who's kind of involved? Because I believe there's 2 leagues going on, and playoffs are coming up quite soon.
Yeah, so I guess I'll break it down. Like I said, all female female pro league, and then it's backed up by the help of Isolation Empire. So they're the ones that are it's the big org behind it, and then so all the staff on there. And then Happy, the big boss. He's sort of helping to run the FPL. Then I have Dylan Proverb, who helps with a lot of production, MLG and UMG. He's helping production here. And there's me and Lisa, who help coordinate the tournaments. And I also help get all the casters. And, we're getting the media team together and things like that. And then, so season 1, it's been, rough, ups and downs, trying to figure everything out, trying to, smooth everything out. But season 1, we have an $8,000 prize pool coming up. The playoffs are this weekend, actually, the 16th. And so we started off with a lot of teams signing up, European, all over the world. We have German teams, US teams all over the place. So we originally envisioned this to be an NA-only league. And then we had all these European teams, just debate with us that they really wanted to be in this league. So we allowed them to come in. And now we've noticed that we've gotten so much attention from the EU teams that now for season 2, we're going to be completely making 2 different leagues. So in EU and NA. Okay. And that's going to be the vision for season 2. And it's going great so far.
So at the moment is kind of two leagues, but you have a mixture of UK and European teams as well as American and North American teams.
Yeah, and since we had envisioned that it's going to be an NA only league, we didn't want to like upset any NA teams that wanted their own league. We said that all NA teams will be hosting. So that's been the sort of the bumpiness in season 1 is all the NA teams host. So it's giving sort of EU teams that disadvantage, of course. But then you have teams like Riot that still stomp off hosts. So it's like so now in season 2 we're going to be ironing out that whole host issue. So now EU teams will only be playing from their own country, and then NA as well having their playing and only NA teams. But yeah, like you said, having that mixture in season 1 was difficult at least.
Did you ever envision getting the exposure that the female pro leagues got in terms of reaching out to a place like Europe? Did you ever expect to have such demand from a different region entirely for this league?
Just exposure in general was really surprising, because I think a lot of people, when they heard of the female pro league, I think there's been startups here and there of people trying to do all female leagues or things like that, and it's just like hasn't gone anywhere. And I think now that we've been surprisingly so successful and we've brought female teams like out of the dark, you know, there are a lot of players in our league, you haven't heard of them before, and they're actually really quite talented. So just bringing these girls from out of the dark and having these it wasn't really surprising to have these EU teams, because I've interviewed a couple of the EU teams like Riot and players from the EU side, and there's a pretty big female scene there too. I just think it hasn't been exploited. And also Riot's always the dominating team, so sort of the female scene is, you know, like that. So, but we've been really happy to have teams from all over the world want to come into our league, and we're happy that we are able to establish something better for them in season 2 so that they can play from, you know, on a host that's more preferable for them, and then offer them their own prize pool as well.
Okay, interesting. Now, collectively, I want to get everyone's opinions in terms of, especially last year, Julia Hardy put out an article kind of detailing about Call of Duty maybe being sexist, very male orientated. In terms of kind of being more equal, we've seen obviously other esports like CSGO develop their own female pro league and kind of develop it on that side. And obviously this and what you're doing, Jen, with Isolation and everyone is doing great as well. But what is really the big barrier here in terms of, I mean, without
like the challenges. Yeah, like what are the challenges?
Like bringing in more females. Like what can we do from Chris and Josh, your experience of actually being a part of EGL and being events holder, seeing, trying to attract these players to come to your events and stuff. What can we do? Is there something we're not doing that can be done by Activision or Treyarch or someone that can maybe even it out, level it out, and bring in more female participation?
Hard to say. I mean, I think the challenges as a player is just not, females just get assumed as they're not at the same skill level all the time as males. And, in fact, that sometimes or most of the time can be true, but there are a lot of females that are at that top talent level, but that will always be assumed to not, like, people like Dream Crazy who are pro and have played alongside pros. And just because she's female, she always had that. And I've interviewed her and talked to her and how she's always had a hard time being assumed that way. But Activision, in terms of what the community can do, I think it'd be cool to have, the female pro league obviously helps, I'm going to plug that in there. But in terms of maybe ESL or bigger orgs, maybe doing those, like maybe a co-ed tournament or some kind of side tournament of having co-ed or encouraging to have females on your team. Because, I mean, people will say, well, why don't females compete in the CWL? It's not that they can't. It's just so hard to find a proper team. And, you can go with an all-female team, but females want to have that diversity on their team to have males, of course. Or if they want a team with the most talented players they can find, and a lot of the time, the bigger sample is going to be, the males. So it's hard for females to get on a team. And if maybe the community could encourage or help the females to get on a team if they're at that skill level, of course.
Which female players do you think are good enough to compete at the top of Call of Duty?
I mean, I would say, like, just looking at the female pro league, the Sway and EX, Riot, like all of those guys, I think they could easily smack some male teams around easy. I wouldn't say, like going against TK or Optic or anything, but
you named 4 people there, yeah?
I got to remember the roster is like.
No. My point is that you just named 4 really good female players. So, by the way, this has nothing to do with how good females can be at video games at all. But you just named 4 really good Call of Duty female players. So why can't they make a team and then put themselves against these top male players and see how they perform. It's not about having a chance against the UK guys. You just name 4 people there who should be good enough to come to you.
Of course, yeah, and that's obviously, like I said, can make an all-female team and go to these events. It's not stopping them. The female pro league just gives them that extra opportunity to make a little bit more money and compete against all females, kind of bringing that community together. But like you said, they can make an all-female team. And, Riot, I've heard, dominates pretty well on the EU side. The NA, it just doesn't get as much traction because of sort of that negative light, and it's hard for females to find scrims because they get egoed every scrim. They can't even scrim male teams, which is where 99% of their competition is. And I just think it's not that they don't want to compete, it's just they lose confidence in themselves and then they can't play at their full potential. But I'd love to see an all-female team just do really well. We've seen some female teams get past, of course, a little bit farther in the losers bracket, but nobody that really show-stopped. And
you could say the same about crappy all-male teams as well, but right? They don't get an opportunity to scrim against the best players, probably because they don't perform with the results. It's not like everyone's getting equal opportunity out there. You ultimately got to earn it.
Of course, there's a skill that comes into play, but if I would come up to any sort of team and be like, hey, I'm really good, here's my GB record or whatever, all these people can vouch for me. A lot of people say, oh, you team with a female, you're this and this. People automatically insult teams because they have a female on them. And it's just, if you're a guy, you don't really want to pick up a female because you'll be made fun of. There's all kinds of factors that, there's skill that will get you on a team. So first you have to be good, but then there's also that negative light of just, it's hard. And of course, I'm not saying it's impossible for a female to get on a male team and be all that and be top, because we've seen Dream Crazy do it. It's just the extra challenge as a female to just make it, to just have the extra challenge of getting on these teams and things like that. That's just my opinion. We can agree to disagree, but
yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where everyone obviously has their own personal opinion. They're entitled to it. At the end of the day, sometimes it's better to voice some. I
think it's better to look at objectively. I was asked some questions based on Jen has 4 players who compete at the top. What I will say, obviously this. Look, if you want to look at a broader scale, yes, video games, competitive video game, multiplayer gaming, that's all massively marketed towards guys. More guys play online gaming, more players play teams. Proportionally, guys should be better than girls at it. But ultimately, if there are 4 girls out there who you just named who can compete at the top, if they compete well and they did play well, they will get picked up because they can win players' games. They can win teams' games.
Of course.
People will bring people on the basis of results.
It is tough though, because I can actually see where Jen's coming from, because for a lot of the women who are trying to compete, they're almost in kind of like a ring fence situation whereby there's only so many people they can play with. So even if they do go to events or whatever, if you're stuck practicing with the same people who week in, week out, there's only so good you're going to get, and so I guess the process is almost iterative as it goes on, and as more women perform better at events, they'll hopefully create more opportunities. But it's unlikely that they're going to be able to get thrown in the deep.
I think straight
away.
Yeah, there's not much truth. I think your hardest challenge, Jen, to be honest, is having female role models who can ultimately attract more girls into the mix in order to make that possible. That's what I was saying. By no means anyone saying that girls can't be as good at it. That no one, there's nothing to substantiate that whatsoever. But the point is there's not enough girls playing right now. I mean, playing in a separate league and one to another, that's quite a hot topic in a minute, because is what's it to say that girls can't be as good as guys? Why would it, on the basis that there's not much of a physical aspect to it, but that's a different conversation entirely. But there's definitely like role models out there who can influence and bring more girls into the scene, and ideally obviously compete to allow you guys to compete against each other more, hopefully break into the male scene better, whatever.
I was going to say, I think the female pro league or women pro league, or whatever you want to call it, is actually a good idea. Even though it's a lot of people kind of kicked off about it on Twitter. What I saw when it was first announced, about like blah blah, it's discrimination. There's no all male leagues and stuff. But in many regards, it is kind of. I think at a certain point you need to have positive discrimination to kind of balance the tables at a certain point, because we're coming from a position where there's so many more males in this. If we're going to eventually attract, more women and actually try and even the odds, perhaps that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. And at the end of the day, women online, especially, even from what I've seen, it's the world of the internet is horrid at times. People, because they can be anonymous behind the keyboard, they can be as ruthless as they want. But women definitely get that worse than like men in esports. The amount of, and in the same way, they probably get more positive comments. Do you know what I mean? If Landon uploaded a selfie you probably wouldn't get 2,000 favourites on it. But
I don't know with that new haircut.
Well, that's why I picked him. To be fair,
you're playing with fire.
I mean, I just don't see why people think the female pro league is a negative thing whatsoever, because it's not that. I get what you mean. Oh, there's segregation of females have their own league. Oh, males should have their own league. It's not about all females or anything. It's just showcasing the best females so that we can give them the opportunity to maybe get on a male team or like on a higher skilled team. It's showcasing the best females in the community, which have been put in the dark and have been, talked, crapped on and whatever else. It's just to put them in a positive light instead of negative. And we want to do the same as CSGO and every other esport that have a female pro league. So I don't know why everybody's arguing that should not happen in COD when it happens in every other esport.
It's simply down to the fact that, like, whatever way you frame it, it is discrimination because there are no all-male leagues. But at the same time, I don't think it makes a difference. There's enough opportunities for everyone for people not to be, making a fuss about that kind of thing.
It's if I can just weigh in my own opinion, from doing a degree in sport, obviously it's very much relatable in terms of stereotypes, discrimination, and you see it across sport, like in modern day now, in terms of certain sports will be favorable for one gender over another. And I think we none of us are saying that, this female pro league means that females will only play with females. As Jen says, it's a way of, if anything, I would say encouraging more females to get into the scene by seeing that there's this female pro league. There's all these females that are entering into it and, starting a team. And if someone's got a friend, then they can ask the female pro league or someone to see if anyone else is looking for a team and so on. But obviously, the end goal is obviously at some point to just make it
just like, more people, basically. More people into it.
More people in, and then obviously we will no doubt in some point, maybe we'll be dead. I don't know. At some point, there will be a team that comes along of 4 females that will be incredibly talented, and they will make it to pro league. I mean, we've seen it already in Australia with Squizzy, and I believe we will see it again. I don't think anyone is discriminating and saying, oh, females don't have the capability. It's just going off statistics at the moment, as Josh rightfully said, males dominate the scene, and yes, some don't give them the opportunity, but the ones that do are the talented ones, and obviously the ones that are at the top.
It's mainly disproportionate. It's a statistic inevitability. That's all it is, because there's less girls, and it naturally fewer girls are going to be as good. I think, from my view, anything that is trying to, as long as the agenda is well thought out, as long as the agenda is good, and anything that tries to destroy misconceptions and prejudices, in my opinion, is a good thing. So, in terms of female pro league, from what I've seen, I believe I would like to think that's the case, and that can only be positive in bringing more people into the scene.
I think one thing that I want to, not choosing one side or the other or anything like that. I really don't think we have sides. I think everyone wants the same thing, but I think in some ways, though, I'm not trying to combine us all, but in some ways too, you have to look at the lack of lands that we've had this year, because in some cases, even as far as males go, not even bringing females out of this as well, but just the general consensus of competitive players are also kind of taking a toll, because even at times, speaking from Advanced Warfare, extent of lands that we had, I mean, granted, there were some players who rose up through that game being known as online players, but the way they truly showcased themselves was through LAN events. And the only LAN event that we've had that's actually been an open tournament, as far as the NA side of things go, because I know we've had some, some lands specifically in EU, but when it comes down to regular open events, we've only had one, which is UMG South Carolina. We know all the issues that happen with that. So I think in some ways, for a male to kind of even propel themselves to try to get to that next level, to be a professional player, lands are a very, very important key to that, because, everyone knows whenever you see an amateur player, he talks about his placings, and the way that you really do showcase yourself is online, but the way you fully kind of end that is through your LAN placings or through how you do on LAN. So I think in some ways that the Call of Duty itself is kind of hindering itself in some cases, because, we have the female pro league, we have the regular league, but the way that these players, the next season of players, whether it's females, whether it's not, the way that we get that next generation is through having these LAN events. And I think in some ways Call of Duty is kind of hurting itself, because we're not seeing the next generation happen in this title because of the lack of LAN tournaments that we just, for some reason haven't got too many yet. That's just my opinion, though.
I think just touch on that real quickly. You're obviously, when you're trying to get on a team, you don't go to them and said, my experience is I scrimmed this team. As you said, it's about actual achievements in terms of placings. But just before we go to a quick commercial break, we also obviously want to bring up, Jen, you got featured in an article, I think, in Toronto Star, I believe.
Yeah.
How did that come about? I just want to kind of, I'm kind of intrigued as to how that all came about and what happened, because it just would be such a kind of honor for anyone, I think, in the scene to be able to just promote Call of Duty eSports?
Yeah, it was really random actually. So I've been in contact with World Gaming. I was supposed to work with them in their recent Call of Duty tournament, and it was sort of last minute, so I wasn't able to go. But I've been in contact with World Gaming, and they're based in Toronto and things like that. And I don't know, somehow World Gaming's attached to Toronto Star, and somehow the writer heard about me and things like that. And they're trying to cover esports, and then particularly esports commentators, where they covered another Toronto commentator, and then they wanted to talk to me. So yeah, so then that happened, and they had a photographer and writer dude come all the way to Sudbury, which is 4 hours north of Toronto, and come and interview me and stuff. So that was awesome.
Awesome stuff. And I think it got published in the paper as well. Or
yeah, the local paper was like, "Oh, cool, we saw you in the Toronto Star. Can we hook you up too?" And it was like the Toronto Star was a really they didn't tell me they wanted to go the whole aggressive female route. They just told me they wanted to come get to know me.
Out what you said, basically.
Yeah, they said they wanted to get to know me, and then I said the female pro league, and they're like, "Oh, the challenges with that," and I mentioned a couple, and then they sort of did this testosterone sort of title, and I was like, "Oh, geez." And then when the Northern Life, where my local paper came in, I'm like, "Can we talk pause? Can you not like make me look like a giant feminist in the paper?" So I was like, "I'm going to talk about the pros of being a female in the scene." So yeah, I wasn't expecting that paper from Toronto to be that aggressive, but just being featured in the paper nonetheless, not complaining, was truly an honor. And I'm glad I could bring esports, a little bit more.
I mean, what we now in a way take for granted, go back 5 years, we would be like, wow, that is like incredible. And maybe you can touch on this, Chris and Josh, in terms of just in general, these news outlets, ESPN, Fox, for example, even talking about Call of Duty esports, this would surely have not even been a thing go back 5 years.
It always comes in like peaks and troughs, I've found. Like there'll be a big event that kind of captures the imagination. I mean, every COD champs that I've been to or whatever, there's always been mainstream press there. But it's just, I guess it's more the regularity that it's coming at now, and the fact that these outlets are actually featuring a proper dedicated website section on their website, whereby they're actually spending money on actually getting proper journalists to report on esports on a consistent basis. And it can only be a good thing for all of us, really, even filtering down. I mean, technically we're a news website as are those websites, but they kind of capture the mainstream audience, bring them in, and we provide a more specialist view on things. So I guess everybody wins when people like that start getting involved and increasing exposure.
Interesting. Anything to add, Josh, at all?
No, you said it very well. That's what I would say as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. At least you guys agree. This is great. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, though. When we come back, we'll be talking about potential roster changes and talking about potentially where teams are going and if any players are retiring. And then afterwards, talking about journalism in esports. So stick around if you do want to hear about that. And at the end of the show, we'll also be announcing who we've got on next week, who I'm hoping you'll be pretty excited for, because the amount of emails I think I've had to send just to get this one person on is ridiculous. But thank you so much.
Having 10 people on, even more people than we're having right now.
Don't guarantee that, because then we've got to go and find 10 people. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Remember to use obviously code STIKS for your G Fuel and SCUF controllers and gadgets and whatnot. We'll be back after a quick commercial break. Welcome back to the Sticks, everyone. Have you got a refreshment or a snack or something? We're going to move on to talk about RosterMania, as I think invented, by Kingdom, if I'm right in thinking. Well, it's just that's the legacy that he's brought on. I think we'll start with Europe first, because there's one legitimate roster change that we can obviously talk about in the form. This is quite upsetting for my part, with Excel selling their roster to Hypergames. I think to give my own opinion from being inside the organization and having an insight, it was a case of obviously not wanting to hold the players back. There was a lot of obviously technicalities that come into it with salary and all sorts. And obviously Hypergames was seen as the right fit. Josh and Chris, what do you make of having Millennium and Hypergames, two predominantly French teams, having a British roster? It kind of goes against what we've seen in the past. We've obviously seen the odd player on, like Tommy's been on Millennium before, etc. But generally, are we seeing kind of like a transition where these French teams are going maybe away from French rosters because of maybe they haven't seen the success that they maybe want?
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think, well, firstly, Epsilon are surely French as well. So that's three of the top teams are on a French roster. But I think it's just a case of, as for a good while now, that more of the top European players are based in Britain. If you can't get Gataga, if you can't get, Broken, a couple of those guys, then where else do you look at a team that are probably going to, get relegated or whatever based on last season? It's an obvious fit to go for the next best thing. It's probably it wouldn't be very manageable for them to own a North American team, more than likely. Communication issues, sponsorship, probably not that easy to sell for those kind of people. So it kind of makes sense, really. On the subject of this, it seems like, if anything, a good bit of business for XL.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, from the figures I've heard rumours of, it sounds like they got a good amount of money for it. As good as the XL team are, I would find it hard to believe that they would generate that amount of exposure for their organisation. So it seems like a good move for them.
And I think it's good on both parts. Obviously, Hyper Games are now into the league, into having a CWL roster and an ESWC spot as well. Let's not forget. Obviously, as you said, XL getting money on their part, and now they're obviously going to be able to reinvest it in other areas of esport.
Yeah, right. Obviously, the guys at XL are still, a relatively small operation. It's still quite a new team, so it seems like it's been a bit of a success story for them, kind of piecing together some free agents, more or less. They've obviously had a really good season, increased their exposure, and then they've got a decent paid out of it. So, with a heavy heart that they lose the team that they've kind of helped nurture, but at the same time, they've benefited from it, and hopefully they'll reinvest the money wisely and go into bigger and better things.
Yeah, naturally. Just on the team thing, French teams. There's no real domestic leagues and whatnot, so I guess I would compare it to the fact that the likes of Millennium, HyperX, these guys who command legions of French viewers, French audience, which obviously is probably second to the American audience. You treat it in that sense, it's like they've got the Premier League audience, and therefore they've got the exposure for it, and that's why obviously getting those kind of teams or players or whatnot is a win-win both for the players and the organisations themselves, because both can grow their exposure, and the other can grow the credibility as a top team.
Exactly. As much as the French guys, love the local French players, like, as we said, Gataga and Broken and stuff. They ultimately probably want to support the best team within within the division, which is obviously a European team. So it makes sense to pick up the best team they can. So I think good move in that regard.
I think for the potential this team has, I think it was definitely a good move. And as Josh rightfully said, it's a win-win, because you've now got a French organisation where we see a lot of the viewership come from, like, France, Spain and Germany. And then you've got also a team that hopefully is not going to get relegated and kind of put them in misery again, because there was the scenario where I think all the teams obviously at playoffs were from the UK, and all the teams in relegation were, funny enough, from France or Spain. So it's a win-win. Just last thing, touching on Europe. There's a lot of rumours going around. I know that DeSoto brought it up. I think DeSoto actually brought it to my attention in the first place about potential changes from Splice and Epsilon standpoint in terms of the rosters that they've used to qualify for ESWC may not be the rosters that we've seen. Well, they're not the rosters, in fact, that we've seen for obviously Stage 1 playoffs, but yet we have no announcement or no official say from Splice or Epsilon in terms of what's going on. So I don't know if you guys have heard that certain player can't attend, or there is actually speculation over rosters changing.
I think our problem is that we hear a lot of stuff from Mike, and I don't know what his source is, so we don't really want to stitch him up. But let's just say that there appears to be a number of significant changes pending, and Europe will more or less be completely irrecognisable for next season.
Okay.
That's what we can give, because I don't want to.
That's fair enough.
I don't know what I can and can't say, because we didn't really clarify that for some reason.
Okay, that is a fair point. That's probably a mistake on our part.
Sorry about that.
At the end of the day, we'd rather obviously keep it this way than say something that does not happen and lead people down a straight path, because that's not what we're here to do. We're not going to obviously say like Optic are going to drop their entire team, because let's be real.
You just gave it away. Good job, Tom.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, but either way, I think potentially there's going to be some more changes. As I said before, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of stuff in the air about potential changes to Stage 2. We might be having more lands announced. I think we all would hope that as well. So there's a lot that seems like there's in the pipeline or potentially can happen. And obviously until it gets announced, we don't really want to kind of spoil it, if you will. But moving over to North America, there has been some hotly debate, Landon, about where Apathy is going. He seems like he has the Bulls corner at the moment.
Yeah. Basically, as soon as the playoffs kind of were, or not the playoffs, but as soon as like relegation was over, and we get to think about it too, is the amount of rosters who didn't make it to the next season is incredible. I mean, you have teams of relegation who didn't make it, being Team Liquid, being TK, being C9 Eclipse, and also being CLG, along with some other teams who didn't end up making it through the relegation. You see how many talented players are on this list, and definitely the most sought-after free agent right now has gotten to be Apathy. Directing toward what I just said a second ago, was that as soon as the relegation ended, once Apathy was kind of had gotten back, and I was like, "You're going to be a popular man soon." He was like, "No, probably not." And I was like, I know, because like of all these rosters, players are being looked after, and he's definitely a top player to be watching for. From what I've heard, and this isn't a reliable source, like too, and I'm not mentioning anything specifically, but there is a number of different offers that he's received. So it's not just one. I know he's received a couple of offers, kind of just clarifying to see how valuable he really is, meaning that it's not just one team who wants him. Teams are willing to move players to different rosters, or even willing to move their own teammates or own players to go to free agency just to grab this guy because how talented he is. You've even seen with the whole Team Liquid roster, everyone's been kind of curious, like, is the entire Team Liquid roster going to be picked up and put on roster for a certain season? Obviously, they all can't be on the same team. They just kind of spread out, and it's definitely kind of looking to be a potential opportunity because of how talented those guys were. And obviously, they narrowly fell short. I think they were one of the teams who ended up getting reverse sweeped at the relegation. So kind of better, but I'm sure that they'll get their chance potentially, especially Apathy in his own regard. So I think yesterday he said that he is guaranteed to have a team, and for some reason he was giving out clues like my teammates have this particular type of hair color. It was like, it doesn't really make sense to me, but he's definitely
I think the only person I envisioned doing that, saying, "Oh well, my teammates got 1 inch long fingernails or something." I don't know where I'm going with this. Either way,
that's not how I thought you were going when you said that at the start. I was like,
that just didn't end well. Like, let's not. Goalie's like wetting himself now in the background. Let's not go there. Some weird stuff does come out of my mouth occasionally. I apologize, but Jen, now sadly with roster changes, we have the potential of players potentially retiring. One thing I particularly picked up on this week is Merc. Merc increases YouTube content by quite a lot. Now, traditionally, I think one of the big reasons we don't see a lot of content creators coming out of pro Call of Duty players is because of how much time they obviously dedicate into the game and play with their team and so on and so forth. I want to speculate as to whether his increase in content making potentially is meaning that he doesn't have anything lined up. What is your kind of opinion on that? I think we all would be quite sad to see Merc obviously stop competing.
I guess, well, yeah, he's like a huge veteran. I guess it's sort of his fallback plan. I wouldn't say he doesn't have anything lined up, but maybe he's just killing time and trying to not lose his love for Call of Duty by maybe making Call of Duty content and things like that. And it's a good second choice. It probably makes him some decent money to pay rent while things are a little slow. But I was more saddened by, I guess, Merc being the first one to retire and then possibly Burns off. I don't know if there was any update on him getting on a team, but I was really, really sad about those two the most.
Okay. Just in general, the overwhelming thing is obviously outside of the CWL Pro Division, there isn't really a lot. It's basically that is the case, because the problem I have, and what really frustrates me, and I get that there's obviously with Activision and Treyarch being involved, there's probably 10 times more steps and procedures that it has to go past now, but it just seems like we're finding things out so close to when they actually happen. Like, for instance, EGL got announced, I think, literally about 2 weeks before it happened. And then it was literally like a hot sale of tickets because there's only a certain amount. And I think it's the same case with the Challenge Division. And I think that uncertainty of knowing what's coming is very daunting for a lot of players, like the likes of Liquid, who obviously didn't get into the Pro Division. So in terms of improving going forwards, anyone's welcome to kind of chip in on this. What can Activision and Treyarch do? Do they just simply set out a schedule from the start of the year? Because you have other esports like League of Legends, and they know where Worlds is going to go, and it's going to be staged a year in advance. Or are we not at that stage yet, where we're just going to have to put up with knowing things maybe a month before?
We've talked about this a lot, a lot of times, at the very least in our podcast. Not to take the limelight away from this one, but I think one of the things of our consensus was that everything needs to be intertwined. We are talking about the CWR here, and there is no link. It's very fragmented. It seems very disconnected. A lot of events don't necessarily mean anything. We don't contribute to a team's performance overall in the season. I think one of the best systems that it can possibly try and copy is potentially tennis's ATP, where it's one body. Every event contributes in some way to it, be through seeding points. You got your Grand Slams, which are like the majors. You've got the ATP finals at the very end, where the top 8 seeds are invited to that tournament. Perhaps the ATP finals aren't as big as the Grand Slams, but in Call of Duty, I suspect the equivalent one would be. But the point is that it doesn't just become about playing, for you're playing at these events. Some tournaments in tennis, you get a lot of the amateurs going, or not, semi-pros and lesser pros going to, while you get the top pros going to the more prestigious events because they're marketed better, or they got bigger sponsorship, bigger prize money, or it's just more televised, bigger audiences. But it all comes into, it's all ultimately weaved together. And it means that it means that fighting for a seeding point, not just necessarily to get to the final tournament at the end of the year, but fighting for a top 10 seed, fighting for a top 20 seed, it becomes just as important as fighting for trophies. You've got Nadal, when he Spanish tennis player, when he went from the 1st seed to the 8th seed over the course of the year, it wasn't just about the fact that he hadn't won any slams. He had a great record of 14. The point was that he'd dropped from 1st to 8th, one of the best player in the world.
Yeah.
That was significant, and there's a real lack of that in Call of Duty. It's all about, the one team who may temporarily usurp Optic, by far the best team in the game. All of a sudden, Optics can be the best, and anyone between 2 and 8 lose status, lose credibility and whatnot, which is not how it should be. Everything should be knitted together. It should be, pre-season, everything should be a lot more clear, a lot more clarified by Activision as to how it's all going to come together. A lot seems up in the air this season, and hopefully they'll improve upon that next year.
Yeah, I think it's largely been teething. This is they've brought in people who are experienced from the likes of MLG and whatnot as part of their acquisition, but at the same time, it does seem like a lot of it is up in the air because there's been plans kind of put in place, but it's just been, I think the reality of putting them together has not been as easy as they initially thought, and there are certainly a lot of changes. I think last week we were discussing that perhaps the open events have been put on ice a little bit because of what happened at UMG. Because why would anybody at this point, especially if I'm UMG, I don't think I'd be putting my hat in the ring to throw another open event.
No, I heard exactly what you're
holding the smoking gun again, because it's just because it's not really, now they know that's definitely going to happen, but it just seems like an unnecessary risk. And I think further down the pecking order is certainly an area that they need to look. I mean, in North America, going back to what we said about the Australian League and the fact that there seems to be almost not an unfair but an unbalanced quantity of money spent on Australia and Oceania. That's no slight to them, but the North American scene is by far the biggest. It could certainly support a lot more teams than what the Pro League is currently catering for. And as a result, the players that we talked about, missing out, and these are players that would walk into most Australian, most European teams. It seems a shame that there isn't more clear action of what's going to be happening, because if you're a Challenge Division team and I've missed out on the Pro League, but I'm going to have this and this to play, then you've still got something to prep for. Whereas now it's just kind of like, what is it? I've just got to wait and see. And even further down the list, you have an event like Am2 Pro, which basically it had been announced well in advance. All of a sudden, a couple of weeks before, EGL got announced, which it was tied into another event.
There's no coordination with these events.
No, there's no cohesion, and it landed on an online tournament where everyone went to. So as a result, it was just kind of forgotten about.
Exactly. And this, one of the beauty of esports are these grassroots events, or at the very least lower league events. You haven't really fully experienced esports as a fan. I'm not saying it's possible for everyone, but some of the guys out there who are on the fence about whether to get into a game competitively, or may just not really know how to get into it, or may just need a taste of it to get addicted to it, to want to play, to be one of the best, or as best as they can be. Going to these these grassroots kind of events is special. I know that from my days playing competitively, I feel that it's lost that sense of community. It's all online now. It's all spaced out across the world, which is great in esports online, but a lack of smaller events, or a lack of just open events and whatnot, I wouldn't say it's given lasting damage, but I think it's had a negative impact on the season this year. Another thing that I think we can improve the CWR by is how some teams, how countries, nations can qualify we're going to miss out on, Fave this year. A couple of the teams, I say those because obviously those guys are attracting a lot of viewers on the stream. But the point is that, like the Champions League, each nation should have an opportunity, or at least select nations should have an opportunity where at the very least one team can, or the biggest ones, not
so like individual qualifiers for each.
Yeah, because it's important, because it's an incentive for these nations with bigger communities to want to have aspiration and ambition. If our best team can do it, then there's a chance that we can take their spot and play in the league as well. But it doesn't have it, It's all about. It's a free for all at the minute. It's basically, other than a few select spots, basically anyone can qualify. I think that it shouldn't be like that.
Okay. Great topic. I don't want to kind of go away from it, but coming back to roster changes and stuff, and potentially what can happen. A lot of people I see in the chat talking about an envious change. We, I think, touched on that last week, Landon, did we not? About the potential of who goes where, and obviously are Aches and Teak going to stay together and all sorts. Do you still potentially see this roster making a change after their performance at season 1?
Yeah, I think honestly, Envy knew heading into what was the playoffs, realizing such things that they really needed to make a change. And I think after their loss, I believe they ended up losing to Elevate, and in some cases it was a solid team. I believe they ended up finishing like top 4, top 5 in the league, which is a very solid team. But in some cases, you looked at the beginning Envious roster and saw how talented they were. I think they actually had like the first seed heading into UMG South Carolina, in which case they didn't have really the best showing either. I think they ended up losing to Luminosity, but still, like, they've had some good moments here and there. But ever since, I mean, you even have talked about this as time has gone on, since they added Havoc to the roster and the knowing of this change is happening. And you kind of keep in mind as well, if you're a player for a certain roster and in some ways you are replaced, it's going to be very hard for you to come back to that team and still try to make this team a success. And granted, now you have to keep in mind, in some cases as well, that coming back to this roster, I want to maybe prove myself. But the way that Aches works, I mean, he's a veteran, he knows what he's doing. And in some cases, I think that was in some ways like a slap to the face to him. Not taking anything away from what Envious did, not taking anything away from what happened and stuff. That was obviously on their regards. But I think as well, the whole topic of roster community kind of goes down, and I think it's going to be the pinnacle of what Envious does. I without a doubt think that Envious makes a change. The players who are kind of on the target right now seem to be both Slasher and Aches, obviously due to their confrontations. It wasn't just the fact of Aches being released for Havoc. It was all the issues before, all the amount of altercation that they had on stream. I mean, there was I believe this is all like knowledge, so I'm not saying that shouldn't be said. But there was even a time where JCap and I believe Aches were talking, and JCap was like, "I think you're throwing matches," and he was like, even having that discussion, let alone having that on stream, just goes to show that they couldn't even keep that behind the scenes, that they actually had to kind of throw that out there. So I think with that we see Envious make a change. I don't know when it's going to happen. I would expect within the next couple of days, because realistically, you have less than around a week before the league ends up starting up. I believe it starts the 19th. So. But yeah, I think for sure Envious needs to make a change, and I think it all kind of comes at the pinnacle of what Aches, how he performs and what they've discussed with him.
Okay, I think we'll leave RosterMania there for now. Obviously, we'll probably pick up again next week. I mean, the important thing is to know that the league starts next week. For anyone that didn't know, it starts on the 19th, which is next week Tuesday. Obviously, I think they're still going to run the Tuesday Wednesday setup where they have matches on both days, from what I've heard. So basically, from now until our next show was obviously next Monday, there's got to be something happen. If teams are going to make a change, something's got to happen. If Apathy is going to get picked up, I'm pretty certain he'll get picked up by someone, most definitely, then that is obviously going to have a domino effect into more roster changes and so on and so forth. But moving on to talk about esports and journalism, something that obviously both Chris and Josh are now within themselves doing. I want to start off by looking on the less favorable side of the job. I want you both to kind of give me your least favorite thing about being an esports journalist.
That's a very odd angle to come from it.
Yeah, I'm going to start at negative. I'm going to build it up, and by the end, everyone's going to be like, "I want to be an esports journalist."
Well, because obviously, I mean, we run a business now, so I guess our esports journalism isn't, I guess, as broad as it used to be. Well, it's not as intense as it used to be. Not that we've ever been, in terms of esports journalism, we've done quite a lot. Probably it was our most intensive when we were doing stuff in Desertos maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and when obviously then we did some stuff for Red Bull. But I guess the only bad thing about it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, is just having the ideas. But I wouldn't say it's bad.
The content itself.
I wouldn't say that's bad. That's actually exciting. It's just that's the challenge of esports journalism, having the ideas in the first place, you know.
But for me, I mean, in terms of like pure writing, I'm down with that. That's fine. I think certainly the worst journalism, I guess you would call it journalism, as much as anything, is when you're lumbered with reporting on events, and as in not just writing about events, as in just doing like Twitter stuff, which is obviously quite a prominent thing.
And be glued to.
It's just really like, and I think obviously goalie's not. Is goalie on pit screen? I can't see, but obviously he seems to do some unbelievable hours, just like reporting on like almost 24 hours straight of tournaments. And I think like if I'd be semi-suicidal if I'd done that. So yeah, that's for me that's the worst part of it, because it's monotonous. I'm not getting. That's nothing to do with like I'm happy to share my opinion and write articles about things I'm interested in, but that is nothing. That's me just like sitting and watching and just saying 1-0, 2-0, changing a graphic in Photoshop. That's for me. That's in my modern day-to-day. That's certainly.
Yeah, even then, that comes to time as well, because you can also be. But it's hard to be. I don't think that would be so bad if you weren't limited to the brevity of Twitter and reporting on Twitter. But that can be part of the exciting thing, you know, saying a lot in a few words and making that 140 characters that you say reporting on have an impact. It is monotonous, I agree, but it depends. If it's a good game,
that's different. If it's a good game, it can be really good. If it's a good tournament,
there's
some days where I'm just like, oh, please God, we're one map in and there's 900 to go. And you know, you're tired and you just think, I wouldn't do anything but this now. And like goalie of all people can no doubt relate to like the hell. And I feel for him because he seems to be a bit of an unsung hero in that regard.
Yeah, I didn't tell him this, but I kind of did want him to kind of weigh in a bit on this, because goalie, I mean, you're not on screen, but people will be obviously able to hear you. The man hours you put in over event weekends is ridiculous. People don't realize as well, there's a lot of obviously preparation that goes into it. Obviously, as time has evolved, there's now become the need for graphics and to present yourself in the right fashion. And obviously, as events come and go, you have to change the graphics and so on and so forth. For you, what is the biggest frustration? Because I know that it's a very tedious job. And is it just a case of you just have to grind through it? Because like at the end of the day, you doing it is obviously maintaining your relevance and kind of growing social media. And we've seen the amazing job that you've done at COD Esportspedia with their Twitter handle.
Okay, so you just said like 50 things.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but oh man. So like the last 3 weeks of the CWL, I was until North America came around, I was pretty much on my own those days. So those were 48 hours straight for 3 weeks, and that's just awful. Like doing the Twitter coverage, it's fun, but it is monotonous, as like Chris said, and like when you do the same tweet over and over and over again, and it's a great service. Like the reason that we do it and the reason that I do it is because it's a great service to the community, and it keeps us active and it keeps the community interested in the CWL and all of that. But man, it's rough, especially like for Esportspedia. Before the CWL starts, I normally do about 5 hours of prep work on the site, and then we get into live coverage. And normally, because ANZ CWL starts on Monday or Tuesday morning for me, I get done with the sticks, I upload it, I take a 3-hour nap, and then I get back on for 48 hours straight. So
I was almost certain that you were going to say, when you said you do 5 hours prep, I thought you were going to say you do like 5 hours of vigorous exercise, and then you're like, let's do this.
You fall asleep instantly.
Yeah. You don't understand goalie's workload, because we are very cruel and have the sticks on a Monday, but it just seems to work. As he says, we have Monday kind of evening time, obviously over in the US, and then obviously he has to get it up before the start of the CWL, I believe, because obviously with connection and all sorts, it's a pain in the arse otherwise. So there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, though, there are some perks to the jobs in terms of places you may get to visit. I mean, Chris and Josh, what would you say is the best place you've been able to visit through doing journalism in esports?
Specific place? You don't know this, Chris?
I was going to say, sadly, I think that we'd already been to a lot of places.
Please don't say Blackpool. Please don't say.
Definitely not Blackpool. We'd already been to like a lot of. Oddly, the journalism angle hasn't actually taken us to as many variety of places.
Always the same place
stuff. But yeah, but you know, I always like going to LA, for example. You know, been to some cool places in America. Probably America's normally been the better one. I mean, I don't even really think we've been to Europe that much since Desert became full time. France, maybe that's right.
Yeah, not Holland, obviously. No, it literally has just been Germany. Obviously, we have been to Germany a few times, obviously for it.
A lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, LA's always, LA's always quite fun. Cologne's great place. Yeah, but Chris is right. To be honest, I've probably been, in terms of esports overall, quite a few places, but specifically the journalism, it's just basically been all America.
Okay. And in terms of how exactly did you both get into doing journalism? Because obviously you've been in a variety of jobs, as we talked about at the very start, but what was it that kind of brought you into this?
It was just by extension of well, for me personally, I used to play professionally. Chris used to run a professional organisation. So it's by extension. You write, or you do, or you work about what you follow your passion. If you don't do it for one avenue, you do it. It develops into another. And writing about it, going to events, reporting on it. We've always done Deserter, even though it was a part-time thing in parallel to whatever we've been doing over the past 7 or 8 years. And then we realised that we had an opportunity with Deserter, to make that into something a lot more significant. But yeah, was your original question, how do we get into it, or how to get into journalism specifically?
Well, I wanted to know how you specifically got into it, and then we'll obviously talk about it.
Exactly that. Yeah. I think it's just like for most people who get into esports, you kind of get bitten by the esports bug, and after you stop playing or whatever level, you try and find some sort of natural progression into another role so you can stay involved, whether or not be running a team, running events, doing whatever. And so, both Josh and I, we kind of grew up also using like community forums and stuff for whatever game we were playing. And I guess like I'm not even sure I could read at age 16, but as a result of doing stuff like that and always be writing, and it's over time you improve. And then it seemed like a bit of just the way we got into it. Once you've got kind of a wealth of knowledge and stuff, you've always got stuff to source in your articles, and it just seemed like the logical route, really. And obviously we actually gave up doing EGL and running events to focus on doing Deserter full time. I wouldn't really necessarily consider myself an outright journalist, as more of a business person. But yeah, this just seemed like the obvious way to do it. I mean, from an events perspective, it's just so risky. I mean, look at UMG that we've already talked about. You have one bad event, and all of a sudden everyone's gunning for your blood.
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about it, but that obviously could filter into why we haven't seen as many events. But there's a whole kind of bigger, wider angle that I kind of want to look at in terms of content in general, in terms of content creators. In a way, Deserter are content creators. They produce, obviously. One of the things I really love about Deserter is that you're able to produce content that maybe links to other people's content, if that makes sense. So you'll see a really good video by someone and you'll post it up on Deserter so that it gets a wider kind of perspective and more people can obviously view it. I mean, everyone can filter into this because I think in essence, we all are content creators in one way or another with whatever we do. How important is it as individuals, as a company in growing your brand? Because obviously we see time and time again players, I know that you talked about it with Millennium, in terms of they don't maybe take as good an opportunity of what they've got, in terms of they've got like this organization, they've got the viewership in essence, but they just don't kind of make the content. They don't go that further step, if you will.
What's your question? So
in terms of mainly directed at players, what are they? Because what is stopping them?
Well, it's a shame. I would say it's sad to see them miss opportunities, even though there's not many of them, to be honest, who probably commanded of 12. Well, actually, no, that's not true at all. There's probably about 10, who are wasting the opportunity of brushing shoulders with, basically online celebrities in the American teams, who are wasting being on a global stage, sharing the limelight with these players. And we're not just creating any content at all to basically extend their career, to give it some sustainability once they finally do hang up the pad, or once they just don't become very good at it anymore, which is an inevitability. And they do want to carry on these sports, and they've got to do something that's extracurricular. Tommy Swanee certainly does this. Tommy does some streaming, but as good as Tommy player is, and all of a sudden, someone like Scum turns on, people are going to want to watch the very best playing at that point in time. So people are obviously going to flock to Scum because A, he's developed a personality, and B, he's also the best in the game. What does Tommy have as a personality? Or anyone, Tommy's probably a bad example because he's one of the more prolific ones. But any other European player doing that, even if they won a tournament, they've not developed their personality to the point that anyone really cares about them, you know. And there's someone who's playing better Call of Duty than them right now. It's a very limited thing to do, and they're not capitalizing on the opportunity of where they are at the minute. How it would help the scene, I don't think. Well, we actually addressed this yesterday or on Friday. It's not gonna. They have no obligation to do this by any means. They don't. And it's up to people like the media actually, and the leagues and the publishers, to create the narratives and storylines that make people want to obviously watch and read on a more insightful level about what's happening in the leagues and the tournaments. But it's just more of a case of why are you not doing anything about it? You guys are not going to be good at this forever. Use the opportunity, and it would help the scene a little bit. But even just from a personal point of view, just use your opportunity now to do something. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think Swanee does a lot. Like he's been doing stuff with the BBC 5 Live and stuff as well. Chris, did you want to say something real quick?
No, I just got a tweet that said, "I'm convinced you're going to poke your eye out with that screwdriver that I always seem to be holding for some reason."
Wait, you're holding a screwdriver? Yeah,
I've just got random things on my desk. I just picked it up, didn't even really think. But I think my opinion is the same as Josh. Really, it's like these players. I think some people think that the players should be obligated to kind of create content and push the Call of Duty game as a whole, and I do disagree with that. I mean, beyond what they're as far as their World League obligations go, where they're contracted to do certain things, there shouldn't be anything on players to have to do that. It's more a case of, do they want to do that? If they do want to do it, then for me, I would be doing that. I think it's a bit of a, as Josh said, it does seem like a wasted platform. Why would you not take advantage of the position you're in? But if you're happy to pass that up, I don't think anyone should be putting pressure on them to do otherwise, because at the end of the day, this is just, it started as a hobby, it's now a job, but their job is to compete. Surely it's not to be fully fledged entertainers, filmmakers. And
in terms of Landon and Jen, how is it important for you guys, as not being players, being people that are obviously personalities within the scene? How important is it for you to be affiliated and to go the kind of the extra mile to be, affiliated with a female pro league, or to do casting for Perfect Alliance, in maintaining your relevance and effectively keeping yourselves within the scene as well?
I guess I'll go first. Like you said, I guess just staying relevant, and and COD just, I think, has a lot of growing to do in terms of compared to other esports, and just all these leagues coming out, I think, just brings it forward. And also being a personality, if you're not always creating content, someone else is, and someone else is getting that attention, and someone else might be getting the opportunities or the jobs, or as a caster or whatever else. So I think always staying relevant, you have to create content and stay above the rest, basically. So
yeah, I mean, basically exactly what Jen said is a really good way to summarize it. But yeah, I think if you want to be a content creator, you really have to focus on a particular branch, whether it's, website or doing articles, or, whether it's content making, whatever spectrum of things, whatever you really want to do. And as time goes on, it gets a little bit easier as the esports grow. I mean, there's more and more different opportunities and stuff like that. Watching Call of Duty ever since, we've been watching it for a very long time, but consistently since like the Black Ops 1 days, like 2010, 2011. Kind of realizing and seeing how many different opportunities come as the years go on is great, but it also realizes and shows that you have to really get into it. And if you want to stay relevant, or if you want to be a major person in the scene, whether it's, whatever you really want to do, for me and Jen especially, has to do with casting and stuff, and even content creating, you really have to get into it early. And if you don't get into it early, you really have to just work as hard as you possibly can and outwork people who are next to you. Because there are, I guarantee, 5, 6, and as the esports grows on, that's going to double it, even triple at times, to continue on and try to, stand above the rest, whether that's, studying more, having different opportunities, or, just watching. I think, it's a great thing for the scene, but you do have to work even harder. And, I love Call of Duty, so I'll always be doing that.
Yeah. It's about having a passion about it and wanting to be a part of it. And I think you're right in saying that it's better to getting it now than later, when it becomes a lot more globalized and obviously a lot harder to, it's already becoming hard just to simply be a part of it, because obviously there's so many people already a part of it. And just from my personal experience, I think, I just started making videos about Call of Duty. That's plain and simple. I had a passion for something. I talked about it. Plain and simple. Didn't think it'd turn into anything. And it was about a year down the line when about one person started caring about it, and then I ended up here. And yeah, it's ridiculous, like how things happen. But yeah, not to my own horn. I'm not anybody. Haven't made it or anything. But it's just one of those situations where if you have a passion for it, my best advice is if you want to be a part of it, just work and just network with people. I think networking is a big thing in esports in terms of meeting the right people and developing the right relationships to get you where you want to be. But just to finish off about journalism, what's the biggest advice both Josh and Chris you can give for someone that wants to be in your position, that's aspiring to do this potentially full time?
Do it for yourself. First and foremost, gotta do it for yourself right now. It's like in anything really. I wouldn't even say it's very cliche. I think it's a very underestimated statement in anything in life. If you have a passion for it, do it for yourself. The opportunities may or may not come your way, but get something out of it for yourself first and foremost, in terms of your own personal pleasure.
Yeah, I think as much as anything, I think just write shit. Just go and write some stuff.
Yeah, I should do it. Don't just write it.
If you want somebody to, if you want this to evolve into a career in whatever esport you're writing about, you can't expect to just suddenly somebody to turn up and go, do you reckon you can write? Here's some money, let's test it out. It's never going to happen. You need to put paper first, and if you're good enough, hopefully somebody will spot you. If not, then you keep working at your trade. As I said, I must have been shocking at the start. I don't know if how much better I am now, but I'd like to say I've come on leaps and bounds, and it's just a case of practice makes.
I wish we could get Mike in the call and just weigh in. Well, I mean, it's a learning process. No one starts off and it's just there.
Mike's a more interesting. Well, it's an interesting story in its own right because Mike actually left the esports scene completely.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to stay to serve full time a long time ago. Chris and I obviously were doing each other thing. Mike went into recruitment, and then ultimately his career. He's now got a full time career out of it, despite the fact he had a sabbatical of about 3 years from it. So it happens in odd ways, but ultimately his tenacity, his passion for it was paid off in the end. Oh, we'd like to think it's going to pay off him one day.
It's paying off now until he loses his house.
Till he's on the street knocking on doors like, "Can I come stay with you?"
A great ride.
But the main thing is, from what I've taken from what you guys have said, is obviously do it for yourself, and you've got to have that passion. I think everyone sitting in this call right now, even probably watching this, has a passion for Call of Duty. That's why you're here. You're just entertained by this phenomenon that is esports, and it's just going to keep on growing. The longer you wait to make a name for yourself in the scene, if you want to do something, the harder it is, in essence, is going to become, because there's going to be people sat in the same situation as you, and they'll do it, and you'll wait, and they'll have advantage, and they'll have the bigger exposure, if you will. So
exactly, I think you'll find in esports as of now, because of what I said before, that most people graduate into doing this. So you don't necessarily go and get a qualification and then come back into it. People love it to start with, and then they kind of get into it. And I think as a result, actually, if you're one of the people who goes out there and is proactive with doing stuff, that'll instantly put you in the top 5%, because the other 95% are lazy assholes who are not that bothered about making an effort. They just want it handed to them. That's the best way to go about it.
I think as Chris said, just actually do something. Don't just think about it and sit around and think about it. I could do this, I could do that. You have to put your ideas onto paper or into video or whatever. But most people fail because they just don't do anything, or they're not tenacious enough.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest kind of phrases I live by in life is basically work for your dream, or you'll end up working for someone else's. Effectively, that's how life just goes. And if you want to be in the esports scene, it's perfectly doable. You just gotta have that passion. You gotta have that drive to do it for yourself, as Josh said. And it can be something as simple as just writing one article a week, for God's sake. So yeah, you can do it if you want to do it. We're trying to be encouraging here in some way on a Monday, what is probably the best of ideas. But that pretty much wraps up the Sticks for this week. It's been a really enjoyable show. I hope you guys have all enjoyed yourself as well. We're going to do outros. The way this normally works is you just give yourselves about 30 seconds a minute to give any shout outs, to promote yourself, to promote DeSerto, the Female Pro League, whoever you'd like. You can put in your Twitter handles and stuff as well. So we'll go Jen, Chris, Josh, Landon, and then I'll finish it off myself.
Oh God, I wasn't ready. Okay. Well, thank you guys for having me on the show once again. Going to be a pleasure to come back on, hopefully. And thank you guys for watching. And hope you guys can check out the Female Pro League, either the Twitter Female Pro League, and then the website femaleproleague.com. Follow myself, lemon_kiwi_, and hopefully anybody associated with the Female Pro League. I can't name them all, but they're all a bunch of wonderful people. Hope you guys can at least check out the stream and leave some positive comments. And yeah, so thanks again, guys.
There is no way mine is going to be as eloquent as that.
Oh
yeah, thanks, guys.
Jesus. Yeah, cheers. Yeah, thanks for having me on. First time I've been on this. It was good fun. A lot of interesting topics discussed. I think one of the main takeaways from this, not for me or for people watching, is just kind of do either do whatever you want to do in terms of try be a video maker, try be a writer, but also make sure that you try and consume other people's content and share it as well, because there's a lot of people in this room alone who do a lot of work, and a lot of the time it goes unappreciated because it just doesn't see enough eyeballs.
That is a really creative way of plugging DeSerto in a way, Chris.
I know, and that brings us down to the best of all, DeSerto. And also, don't be afraid to follow me on Twitter to read some of Mike's tweets that he's retweeted. That's largely what my Twitter comprises of. I gave him my login one day, and he basically works kind of like if DeSerto's ever a massive success and we can retire off the back of it, I'm just going to employ Mike as my assistant to run my Twitter account. That's what we're working towards ultimately. But yes, that's me at DeSerto Chris for largely crap opinions, but I'm doing what I can, and Mike's retweeting what he can, so that's that.
Is it next me?
Yes, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Interesting topics indeed. And I guess just keep it DeSerto for all your esports news, entertainment.
Double whammy. We should have put you apart. It's
as straightforward as that. You want the best, and then you want it in several languages. Where are the guys to go to? And thanks for having us, Tommy, and Landon, and goalie in the background there as well.
Stomping away, doing something. I don't know what he's doing. But guys, it's been your dude, your bro, your pal, your man, your ally on the internet. It's been Landon, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Thank you guys to all the Sticks fan being in the chat. I believe we hit around 200 viewers, which is insane. And most of those are probably people in the call right now. But still, really a great time, though.
It's Mike. It's all Mike. He's just been botting the stream. That's all it's been.
It probably is, Mike. But if you guys are curious, if you guys want to, I've been making a lot of YouTube videos constantly. Feel free to search. Just type in Lando Cod. You'll be able to find that. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Lando Cod as well. A lot of roster changes happening very soon. If you want a place to do that, you can obviously follow at DeSerto, doing some, doing
3 in a row. God.
Right? But you can also follow myself as well, or even Cody Sportspedia. I'm throwing everyone out there. But we really do appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving us, and we will continue to use all the constructive criticism that we can get. So yeah, great time as always.
Yeah, pal. And we'll obviously be back next week with new guests. Thank you so much, though, for everyone that's watching. More importantly, to obviously Chris, Josh, and Jen for coming on. Really do appreciate it. I know it's late in the UK, so obviously we understand and we're thankful. I know Josh is a bit unwell as well. But this is pretty much doing it for this week. We are incredibly excited, though, to welcome Momo next week onto the show, as obviously we're going into the first week of stage 1 for the Pro Division. It's crazy how it's already come round, but we're going to be welcoming Momo onto the show to talk about obviously EU and kind of give you a bit of a preview of the teams, and hopefully we'll have some roster changes to talk about by then. We're hoping there's a slight chance we'll have someone from North America on as well to obviously talk about that section as well, and even maybe there'll be someone from Australia as well. Who knows? We might just be able to cover up something. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. Remember to follow the stream if you haven't done already. We're live every Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern or 10 p.m. British summer time. My name's Tommy. Thank you, everyone in this call, for the work they do across the board. As they rightfully said, just support everyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Everyone makes good quality content, I think, across the board for the most part. And they equally deserve, I think, success. So thank you so much and good night.